Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko, former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur, the founder of Laborless, an H-1B visa compliance automation company, and the founder of GMI Rocket, a digital marketing agency focused on the immigration mobility industry, and of course, which brings you this show. Today's episode 109, and I'm excited because we're talking to a founder of a legal tech startup that doesn't just focus on immigration lawyers, but works with immigration lawyers and sort of supports what immigration lawyers do from a workflow standpoint. So I'm excited to talk about how this company was started, of course, and then sort of how it evolved to supporting all sorts of lawyers and like how immigration lawyers play into the mix. So our guest today is Dorna Moini, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Gavel. And Gavel provides legal document and process automation, workflows, and things like that. So it allows law firms to basically create sort of their own, almost a DIY, and we'll get into this, almost DIY processes based on their workflow, and they can automate certain processes, including documents, steps that you can take, et cetera, which is really cool. It sort of allows firms really of all different specialties to build technology and automation into their law firm and their practice. So we're going to get into this, but before we do, just a quick thank you, first and foremost, to the main sponsor of this episode, Lex Reception. So for the lawyers who are watching or listening, Lex Reception is a legal intake and client support service. They provide 24/7 legal answering specialists so that you, as a law firm, don't have to worry about missing a phone call or a message from a client or a prospect. So they basically receive phone calls or messages. If somebody fills out a form, they can set them up with a consultation. They can also proactively reach out to somebody who they may have missed an email or phone call from. I actually recently heard about a client from Lex Reception who received an inquiry from somebody over the weekend, and obviously they weren't working, and their Lex Reception staff went ahead and sort of reached out to that person right away. And so the lawyer was able to actually get that business instead of having that potential client go somewhere else. So Lex Reception has integrations with different platforms like Clio, Practice Panther, LawPay, and more, so they can play into your tech stack. And for folks who listen to the show, $250 off your first month of service with them. Just click the link in the show notes, or reach out to Lex Reception and tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. So, long intro. Without further ado, Dorna, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk to you and hear about your story and the story of Gavel.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Roman. I'm a huge fan of you and of your show, so I'm really excited to be here and talk to your audience.
That's awesome. Thank you. And actually, we came in contact through social media because you create really great and helpful videos, like legal tech videos, for lawyers, explaining stuff that seems really foundational and important for a lot of folks, especially the attorneys out there that want to be more involved with technology and but maybe don't have the time to become sort of specialists. So love what you're doing as well, and I'm excited to get into it. But before we get into all of your legal tech stuff, with this show, I love to dive into the guest's background and history, and if possible, their sort of their or their family's immigration journey. So you live in California. Your family, you were born here, but your family immigrated to the U.S. actually from Iran, which is a huge community in California, huge community, Persian community here in New York as well. What do you know? I mean, I know you were born here. What do you know about kind of your parents, your family's immigration journey from, to the U.S. back when they moved here?
Yeah, so my parents moved here, both of them independently, to go to school. And so they came here. We're always planning on going back to Iran. They met, and then the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979, which was a big shock to a lot of people really around the world, but was also something that just like many revolutions that we probably see nowadays, no one really knew how long it was going to last and what was going to actually happen to the country. So eventually, over the course of the next several years, the Iran-Iraq War also happened in the 80s. And they because they had met and then they started to have myself and my sister, they decided to stay here. They decided that this was a better place for them to raise their families. But I do have dual citizenship, and so it's a place that still is sort of home to my parents, and my grandparents were there. And I think it's very hard for a lot of immigrants who came here, who really grew up in another place, to fully ever let go of the country that they came from. So it's
Yeah.
nice that they still get to travel a little bit back and forth.
Do you kind of feel that way too? I mean, I know you said you mentioned before we went on the air that you've been there before. Obviously, you were there after the revolution, so it's really impossible to know what it was truly like before then. It was, I mean, very different kind of, daily life in Iran. But do you feel that sense of, kind of ties to your home, with, even though you were born here?
I would say there are definitely the cultural ties,
Mm.
which you can take part in the US,
Right.
like celebrating Persian New Year, for example. But for the most part, my ties to Iran were my grandparents, who have now unfortunately passed away since. So that I don't have a lot of really, really close immediate family there. And
Mm.
it's such a like Iran is such a beautiful place from a
Yeah.
cultural perspective. Just being able to visit all the different cities that have history and buildings that are thousands of years old is
Yeah.
incredible. So for that reason, I feel, a connection to it there. But otherwise, I think most of it was mainly my family being there, and my really close immediate family being there.
Yeah, I really, really hope to visit one day. Yeah, Iran is so beautiful. It's huge and it's so diverse, also, geographically, and mountains and beaches, and just, yeah, there's so much history there.
And it's interesting because it really is mostly the US citizens who can't go there, because I went there, probably it was like 2017, and I actually took my husband, who's an American, and he was like, "Oh, there are people who are French and German and from all these other European countries there
Mm,
who are tourists, but you just don't see any Americans because of our relationship
yeah,
with them."
right, exactly, yeah, and I wonder, and actually, I don't have any other citizenship. I wonder if I did have dual citizenship and I went on a different passport, if American Border Patrol would give me an issue. Any immigration lawyers watching this, if you have any insight on that, let me know.
The right place
So,
to be
but
asking
you,
that question.
exactly, yeah, on my show, give me advice. So you grew up, you were born in California, and but you were not born or raised in Los Angeles, right? Which is where the big community is.
Exactly.
Um,
I was born in Orange County.
mhm.
And so there's less of a Persian community there than there is in LA. I now live in LA, and there's, there are so many Persians here, but not as much when I was growing up.
Did you feel like a sense of, I don't know. I mean, did you feel like almost coming from an immigrant family versus maybe some of your friends who were not? Was there sort of a distinction between, yourself and maybe friends or peers at school, or did you feel like it didn't really matter and everyone had a different background, and even though the Persian community wasn't there, you didn't feel like a quote unquote, outsider or something?
Yeah, I would say I didn't feel too much like an outsider. I would say the places where I felt most like an outsider were probably food and language.
Mm,
Like, my parents would speak to me in Farsi, even when we were out or in the car or whatever. And so that was different. Especially, I grew up in Newport Beach, which is like not very diverse at all. And then food, because everyone else would be taking like peanut butter jelly sandwiches or turkey sandwiches
right.
to school, and my parents would be giving me like the funny, like, actually things that are probably more popular now, like mortadella inside of a sandwich. So, things I think that was the thing that sort of made me feel like, "Oh, I'm a little bit different than everyone
Yeah,
else."
I totally feel that. My friends would take Lunchables with them to school, and I'd have like borscht or something,
Yeah.
like
Which now as an
leftovers.
adult, you're like, "That is so much better than Lunchables." But as
Totally,
a kid, you're like, "I
totally.
just want what everyone else has."
Did your so I mean, Persian food is unbelievable, so good. Did you feel like your family? I'm just curious about this because my family was totally not into American processed foods, and not because of like health. I mean, I guess in theory it was because of health, but now it's sort of popular to read the labels and all this stuff. It really kind of wasn't back in, like when I was a kid, like 30 years ago or whatever. Do you feel like, were your parents similar? They're like, we're not giving you this candy. I don't know what the heck's in it. Like, here's this Persian candy that's got nuts and honey and like, real ingredients that we know. Was it like that as well for you?
Totally. I feel like it was the idea now that we look at labels and we're like, if it has more than 5 ingredients, then we don't want to use it. That was something that my parents believed in when we were kids. We would every Halloween in the morning we would wake up and like November 1st, and my mom would say, "Ants took over your Halloween candy, so I had to throw it out." So obviously, there were no ants don't take over in 12 hours, but they would
That's
just hide all that
hilarious.
trash from us.
And then would they give you something to replace it with?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know if they even gave us anything to replace
That's
it
great.
with.
Here's some carrots.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
that's interesting. Yeah, and like I grew up in so my family came to the US from Ukraine. I was born there, but when we came here I was 2, so I don't really remember much. For all intents and purposes, I really grew up here. But in New York City, the biggest Russian speaking community, whether from Ukraine, Russia, wherever, is really in Brooklyn, like Brighton Beach. I mean, if you ever sort of been to that part, all the street sign, or not the street signs, the awnings that's in stores, and you walk around, everyone's speaking Russian. And so maybe that's probably similar to how LA is for the Persian community. I grew up in a community where there definitely are Russian speakers for sure, but not to that extent. And so my friend group was very diverse. So it's interesting now I meet people who are actually from Brooklyn, and like I'll go there and hang out, and I feel like I'm home in a way, because I go to a random like cocktail bar, like a nice cocktail bar, and on the menu they have like pierogies, and then all the
Oh
waiters
my
speak
god.
Russian. It's not like a little hole in the wall restaurant. So it's just interesting to think about what it's like to grow up, whether were born here or maybe like me, kind of almost born here. To grow up in a community where everyone around you is of your background versus sort of not, whether it's diverse or like you said, maybe yours wasn't super diverse, but not very Persian.
And that's definitely true about LA and Westwood Boulevard for anyone listening who wants to go get good Persian food. You go to like a Coffee Bean on Westwood Boulevard, and there are old men playing backgammon and everyone's speaking Farsi.
I love that.
So
I love that. And the great thing about being in the immigration space is that this is sort of your life. I mean, just being around different cultures and, interacting with people like with their background as the center of your attention and your conversation, I love. I mean, it's just really, really nice. So you grew up in LA, or sorry, Orange County. And I know you went to college here in New York. Is that right? Um,
yes, I went to
on
MW.
the way there, I mean, you said your parents moved here for school. Did you have like entrepreneurship in your family? Is there anybody who ran a business? Like, did you grow up with that at all, or was it more so higher education? Go to school, get a great job, etc.
Yeah, so my parents actually, especially when I reflect back on it, they were pretty entrepreneurial over the course of my childhood even. Before we were born, when my parents met, they started a restaurant that was called The Chicken Show, and they were deep in restaurant. Like, they were buying the chickens themselves, going out and sourcing all the food, cooking it in the backs, like handling the cash register. I think food service is a very tough business, like low margins, lots of competition. But I think that was they might have had that. That's the first one that I know of that was like their entrepreneurial journey together. And then both of them eventually, as I was growing up, both of them ran their own small businesses. Like, my mom worked in mortgage and my dad worked in insurance. And
Mhm.
so I think I grew up with knowing that and sort of seeing the positive aspects of it. But when I went to school, my parents were pushing me in almost the opposite direction. I think you
Mhm.
always see the grass is greener on the other side. If you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking about, oh, all the stability and security and the good things that come with having a really stable job at a large corporation. And on the other side, when you're at a large company, you're like, oh, look at all the flexibility and the
Right.
opportunity and the really outsized benefits that you can get.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it was my parents actually were pushing me more, even though they came from those backgrounds. They were pushing me into higher education. Go get your law degree, which was more. It was out of my own idea, but go get a degree and go get a real job, so to speak.
In spite of this, did you listen to them and agree, or were you sort of more kind of a hustler type of kid, as you're kind of growing up?
I was actually, as a kid, I was really much more of a I was like a rule follower.
Hmm.
I did what I thought what I was supposed to do. I think that there were a lot of like I didn't like start any businesses when I was a kid, but I think there were lots of characteristics that I may have had that sort of led to being an entrepreneur. But my root and my purpose was never around how do I monetize it, which I think a lot of like young entrepreneurs are thinking like, how do I make money so I can buy this thing that I
Hmm.
really want? For me, I think it was more around how can I make an impact. So, as an example of this, my parents and like some of our aunts and uncles, like they smoked cigarettes. And so my a lot of my some of my family is in London. So we were like visiting all my cousins in London. And basically we organized a group of us to go door to door in the neighborhood and like petition people to sign something that said that our parents shouldn't smoke anymore. So while it's not entrepreneurship in the true sense, I think those are some of like the characteristics that you need to have around just going putting yourself out in the open, being open to rejection, doing things that are unusual that carry forward into later life.
Yeah, like leadership, taking action, having an idea, and actually just putting it out into the world and sort of seeing what happens.
Yeah. Especially if it's
Yeah,
something that hasn't been done before and that's a little bit more unique.
definitely. It's funny. I had a conversation with another guest recently, and we spoke about for that person. It was starting. I forgot what he said. It was starting like a student group or something, or it was running the school newspaper. And for like in high school or maybe it was college. And for me, my first sort of entrepreneurial endeavor was starting a student organization in law school for immigration law, like students for interest in immigration law. And to your point, yeah, it was nothing about monetization. It was just like, I want to have this effect. I want this result to exist in the world. No one else is going to make this result exist. I have to go make it happen. For you, it was, having your family members stopping, their cigarette smoking. For me, it was creating this organization. And so it's just that sort of level of confidence that I can make this happen, right? I don't have to wait for somebody else to do it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, you
Then
don't have to operate within the structures that already exist. You can sort of go
ex-
out and do your own thing.
And I
Yeah.
think that is entrepreneurial. I think the only difference is that, to your point, you're not making money off of it. But once you figure out how to do that from, the sort of creating a structure standpoint, the money comes. You can always figure out how to
Definitely.
monetize.
Once you have
That's
impact, there's always some money that can be there's some way to monetize it.
totally, that's the whole VC model anyway. They're like, listen, don't worry
Exactly.
about the monetization. Build something, and then we'll figure it out.
Exactly.
So
And I
when you
think
went to,
just one more thing to say
yeah,
on like the what did you have the entrepreneurial spirit inside of you as a child? I think I was one of the things that I like to say to other people who are thinking about entrepreneurship a little bit later in life is that I really don't think that you need to have had it as a child. I think a lot of times people are limited by the fact that they think, "Oh, I was such a rule follower. I was such a
right.
in the box, do exactly what I'm told, go down the charted path." And so I can't even conceive of myself as being an entrepreneur, but I just want to sort of dispel that notion. I think growing up I was also a very serious ballet dancer. So I danced like 6 days a week. It was like my life. And that was also one of those things that kept me within structure. But that structure is what allows you to then be creative because you have all that foundation on which you can sort of launch yourself off.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually had a few friends that never worked a corporate job and went straight into like running their own business. And I would reflect on the fact that, even in college, I worked at like big investment banks as an intern and whatnot. And even stupid things like understanding how a large organization
Yes,
organizes files and, the idea behind setting up meetings. Not that I'm a big fan of meetings, but structure, organization, planning ahead, having some accountability on previously created plans. Like it makes sense, but when you've never done that, you might have an idea, you might want to implement it, but you just don't even know where to start. Those little things even. But to your point, definitely, I don't think it has to be something that you have innately in you. It just you can get to it later in life and then leverage everything you've learned up to that point and actually probably even be better than somebody who's sort of never had that kind of a job, or at least get to a place of success more quickly.
yes, there's
Yeah,
so many paths to get to
yeah,
that result.
totally. The person who I think started Beyond Meat,
Uh-huh.
started in like his 60s
Oh, wow.
after being like a scientist for many decades and working on this kind of a thing. And yeah, it's just, you never know when inspiration will strike, and then you just sort of figure it out. But
I guess that's also another example of, I mean, I don't know that much about the company, but it's very mission driven. Like
right.
had had a desire to create a world in which we're not eating animals, and and that then leads to lots of opportunity from the financial perspective, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll figure out how to monetize it. Let's get to the delicious fake meat first, which
Exactly.
I don't mind. I don't mind. I'll eat it once in a while. Impossible or Beyond Meats. So you came to NYU, or you came to New York. You studied at NYU, right? And then you went to law school. Did you sort of, I don't know, like where did that idea come from in terms of wanting to become a lawyer for you?
Yeah, so I growing up, I definitely saw that there were, with all the flaws that we may have in our US justice system, there is so much to be really proud of and really just thankful that we live in a country that at least has some of those bare minimums. And so seeing the disparity between what we have here and what is existing in other countries led me to actually, originally I wanted to become a human rights lawyer. So I went to law school thinking that that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go become a human rights lawyer. In college, I actually worked for an organization in New York, actually called Open Society Institute, where I worked. So I also speak French. I went to a French elementary school, and so I think languages gave me the opportunity to be able to have different jobs that gave me fun experiences. But I worked originally for Open Society Institute as a translator, and then they had me go to Mauritania, which is a country in West Africa.
Mhm.
Mauritania is interesting because it's the last country with traditional forms of slavery. So obviously, there's a lot of terrible modern forms of slavery still existing and legalized in the world, but it was the last country that had not criminalized or criminalized traditional forms of slavery. So that was the whole mission, was that we were working with the government there, with the U.S. Embassy, just like a lot of different, with some NGOs there, to draft legislation that would ban slavery and criminalize it in the country. So that was always what that was actually still in college. That was always what I wanted to do, was go into human rights law. So that is originally why I went to law school.
Hmm. And when you ended up going to law school, I mean, did you pursue that at all, or were you kind of like,
Yeah, so actually I think this goes back to the building the foundation
hmm,
theme that we were talking about. So I went to law school. I worked with the International Human Rights Clinic. And through that clinic, we worked with the ICTR, which is the tribunal for Rwanda. And then I also went and worked at the ICTY, which is the criminal tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, for 4 months. I was in The Hague. And that was a really amazing experience. And like, I still thought that was what I wanted to go do eventually. But what one of the teacher that I had, the professor who was teaching the International Human Rights Clinic, she had gone and clerked, and then she had worked at a law firm for several years. And she sort of said, uh, no matter if you go down the like standard path of going and working for a big firm, you're always going to be able to launch into what you want in the human rights world, and it'll give you the foundation that you need for that.
hmm,
So, along with student loans and needing to pay those
right?
off, led me down the path of going into working for a big firm, which I definitely think for me was the right decision, because I went straight from undergrad to law school, so I'd never had any work experience, and being in that environment where it was working very long hours, sometimes sort of mean people, just really really demanding client service, all the things you said about just working for a big corporation, big organization, that transformed me as a person. And I think without that, I don't know if I would have been able to structure and set up a company and run it and scale it the way that I have been now.
Yeah, and honestly, when you work 80 hours a week, you're working 2 years worth of
Exactly.
work in 1 year. And when you're when you haven't, if you haven't had a full-time job before, especially now you're a lawyer and everyone expects you to like know all the stuff, and you're like, I've only been in school for the past 25 years of my life,
Mhm.
whatever, 20, whatever, however many years. it definitely is helpful. And also, I mean, I don't know if your firm had this, but if you're at a decent sized firm, there's usually training and there's structure around how to get junior employees like set up for success, which to your point, you can then translate to doing your own thing. A lot of people break off and run their own practice. And I mean, this podcast isn't really about that as much, but a solo law firm is a business. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You have to be a lawyer and also run a business at the same time. And it's tough. I mean, I really admire people who go to law school and then just do that right after graduation.
That is hard.
And,
Yeah.
and succeed, you know, but some people have that mentality. Maybe they've been running businesses since they were kids. I mean, you never know.
And I think that's one of the things that is lacking in a lot of the legal space is just awareness of that fact. Like you were working at a small firm or a solo firm, you truly are an entrepreneur.
Right.
And if you think about it in that way, I think that actually is what propels you to grow faster. Thinking about how does your pricing model work? How does your like marketing work? What's your cost of customer acquisition, et cetera?
The challenge too, I found in the immigration space, and I hope this doesn't upset anybody, but you know, other lawyers too, but I particularly because I know so many immigration lawyers, you know, even the corporate ones are so driven by the mission, like the desire to help somebody have a better life. I mean, you know, at the very basic level in America, and it doesn't have to be an asylum seeker, right? Like when I was working in corporate immigration, I mean, these are people who, you know, maybe they were from actually a relatively poor part of, let's say, India, and their family did everything they could to save up and send their, you know, child to the best schools and to become, you know, a great software engineer. And then they finally got this job at a US company. This H-1B visa is their ticket to this incredible life. Maybe they're not escaping, you know, like direct political, you know, violence or something, but nevertheless, you're transforming their entire life. You're transforming their family's life. And frankly, even if it's not that extreme and it's just somebody who is from anywhere else and had a decent, you know, life, and this is going to be a really fun, you know, great learning opportunity, et cetera, to come to America, they're grateful, you know. So it's that kind of desire that drives immigration lawyers and surely many others as well. When you're that kind of a person, the last thing you want to think about is how do I maximize my return on investment of my technology and my law firm, or like how can I make my pricing model such that, you know, I'm making enough money to pay for myself, whatever, right? Like that's the last thing on your mind.
It's interesting though, because I think then you can tie it back to the impact. Like the more efficient you are and the better your technology is, the more of those people you're able to serve. Even if you're not thinking about like the dollar signs, you're just one person or you're however many people in your firm. And the scale is what you can achieve by optimizing all of those processes.
So I think you're right, but somebody has to tell you that usually in order for you to have that idea in your own head. You know, coming to that conclusion on your own in a vacuum is hard.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. You have to be reading books. I mean, you have to be doing something where you're understanding the perspective of a business person and then reflecting on your own career as as a lawyer, especially if you run your own practice. You need to hear that from somewhere or someone. And if you don't, and you're not learning about it in law school, you're not learning about it on the job when you're a junior attorney, you're just like cranking out whatever cases or files, whatever you have. And then you start your own firm, you wouldn't know. And actually, to go back to the original point, your videos, I think, are part of that discussion. Like, here's how to think about technology as a way to, you know, make your law firm more efficient so that you have more impact with whatever you're doing.
And I think the big issue is also that a lot of these firms, they have so much on their plates that you don't have time to even take that reflection space, as you say, like to just step back and read something about the field or how you could be modifying your practice. And so that is why I actually started my social media channels, is to say, even if you are just scrolling through Instagram, this 1-minute video hopefully will help give you a few ideas of what you could be doing in your practice.
Yeah, and frankly, for a busy attorney, a 1-minute video is really kind of all they have, on a daily basis, but it adds up. So this is actually a good opportunity for me to just pause for a second and give a big thank you to the second sponsor of this episode, which is DocketWise. So for folks who are in the immigration space and, you know, listening, you might have heard of DocketWise. They are, you know, one of the bigger immigration tech and case management platforms out there. They have best in class immigration forums, really customizable questionnaires in a ton of languages so that you can send them to your clients in their native language to fill out information. They were the first company, to my knowledge, that had open APIs. And so they have integrations with all sorts of tools, including Laborless, my startup, which I'm very excited about. Great customer service. And I will say that one of the things I really love about DocketWise is that they also create a lot of content as well for the industry. So blogs, ebooks, they have a podcast out now, et cetera. And I think that's really helpful. I mean, they support this show, which I hope is, valuable for the immigration industry. So big thank you to DocketWise for being a sponsor of the show. If you're an immigration lawyer or at a law firm and you're interested in learning about them, maybe you're looking for a case management system, or even if not, you just want to check out what else is out there. Use the link in the show notes, or just go to docketwise.com and chat with them and tell them you heard about that from the GMI Rocket show. So immigration tech, important for scaling our firms and of course scaling our impact. So you went into a traditional corporate legal role. You did that, I know, for a number of years, I think across a couple of firms, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. First at Shepherd Mullen and then at Sidley Austin.
Nice. So, corporate law, there's thousands of employees. You could be doing any number of things. But from what I understand, the thing that really kind of impacted you the most was, and I think this happens pretty often, was some of the pro bono work that you were doing. Right. So can you talk a little bit about sort of what was that pro bono work and, kind of what were some of the ideas that came out of it?
Definitely. So I did pro bono work. So as at a large law firm, usually you're able to do like 100 or 200 hours a year of pro bono work. So you're fairly limited in what you can do. But I did pro bono work across a few different areas, but the one that really was impactful and that led me to where I am now with Gavel is I was working with domestic violence survivors. And we were working, so our firm was working with a few different legal aid organizations where they would partner with us to give us these pro bono clients, and we would help them through their cases. They were at various stages of the case. So it could have been very early stages like restraining order. It could have been, taking them to court for that restraining order. It could have been taking their appeal on novel issues of law that may have come up from those initial trial court proceedings. But the one thing that really stood out to me was the sheer number of people who needed help in the domestic violence arena and how many of them we were able to serve. So as probably most of us know, there's a huge problem with access to justice in the US and beyond. About 92% of legal needs go unmet legal needs of low-income Americans go unmet. That doesn't also count the fact that the middle class also has a huge unmet need for legal services. That's specifically counting people who qualify for legal aid. So even if you do qualify for legal aid, which I think the latest numbers is like 125% of the poverty level. So I think somewhere around $40,000 for a family of four is like where you qualify for legal aid. So really, really, really like you're making nothing. That's above that. You have to figure it out on your own, or you probably don't get to avail yourself of the legal system. So going back to the domestic violence sphere, so there were all these people who were coming in who were needing legal services, and we just weren't able to serve all of them. At the same time, I felt like I was spending a lot of my time on parts of the case that were a little bit more routine, that didn't necessarily need me to be doing it, and that I could really automate. So what I wanted to do was build a software tool that would be something sort of like TurboTax, but TurboTax or LegalZoom, think of any of these analogies, where a user could get onto the platform, answer a series of questions, be routed down different paths depending on their use case. If they have children, they go down a specific path. If they were married to the person, they go down a different path. If the person has guns, they go down a different path. And at the end of that process, they could get all of the things they need for a domestic violence restraining order in California specifically. So this is very limited. I didn't know how to code. So I got together, I lived in San Francisco at the time. Everyone I knew was an engineer or a lawyer. So I got together with a friend of mine who was an engineer, and I said, I really want to build this thing. Can I hire you to help me build it? So we did that. We built basically an end-to-end platform for domestic violence. It worked in most of the counties in California, as you may know. Well, maybe not as much because immigration is so federal, but domestic violence law, state law, every county has a little bit of an additional thing that they needed to do. So we weren't working in all 58 counties, but in most of the counties. So we launched this tool, and we actually got quite a bit of traction from it. We had mainly three audiences: the legal aid organizations who could expedite their work, the pro bono attorneys inside of the firm who could generate their work more rapidly, and then third was consumers. So if you were an individual who needed a restraining order, some of these legal aid organizations could refer you to our site, and you could go through that entire process, from entering your information to being shown videos about the process to finalizing the documents and filing them. Obviously, it was the more like simple cases that we could take on. Like if you need someone to go advocate for you in court, we would kick you out and route you to the right parties. But it was we were charging a really small fee, like $15 per time that you wanted to go through it, and it just like sort of took off in the first few months. We had like almost 2,000 users by month 3.
Wow.
And we started to actually hear from other lawyers, not that they wanted to work on something for domestic violence, but that they wanted us to build them similar tools for other areas of law. Like we had a little bit of press for this tool, and we heard in the first day that this article came out about the domestic violence platform, we had lawyers from 3 different countries: someone in Malaysia who wanted to build a child support tool, someone in Arkansas who wanted to build an eviction defense tool, and then someone in Canada wanted to build a divorce tool. And they were like, "Can you help us build these things?" So we were like, "Okay, should we become like a technology services business?" So at first we started to build these tools for these people. We were like, "Okay, give us your requirements. We'll go build these tools for you." And then what we realized was that the best way for us to make an impact and really scale out the level of knowledge, legal knowledge that can be put into software and help lawyers scale out their practices more rapidly was to build what we now have built with Gavel. So now with Gavel, you as the expert can come into the platform, basically we have little building blocks. It's not coding. You don't need to know how to code, but sort of like code and put together the pieces of the puzzle to make your perfect platform. Everything from data entry to videos to document generation to payment portal and client portal. So that was sort of the journey to getting us where we are now.
What was the name of the initial product that you built, if you had a name for it?
It was called Help Self Legal.
Help Self Legal.
Sort of a play on like self-help, but
yeah.
Honestly, it wasn't a very good name because people always people always type in self-help legal,
right,
and they would go to the wrong site. So
yeah, that's fair. But at least they probably know what they're getting themselves into.
Exactly.
So, and you self-funded this initially, or was it like, did you get any grants or anything like that?
Yeah, self-funded at first, which, especially, so I was at my firm, we built a domestic violence platform, and then I had been working for like 7 years. So I had just savings from working in a big firm. And it was definitely, I was like, oh, I'm paying this engineer. I'm not making as much money as his salary yet, but you sort of have to have faith in what you're building. And then I eventually decided I was going to go do this full time because working at a big firm and then also trying to start a product on the side, you just can't give it enough time, and the firm work would always take precedent. So I say it sort of in a sentence, but it was a very long and arduous decision. But I decided to take the jump and leave the firm and go do this full time. And actually, at first, I was not building Gavel full time. I was building the domestic violence platform full time, which was then that whole journey took place until we got to what is now Gavel.
And out of curiosity, I guess, I mean, I'm sure this was a private conversation, but overall, how did the firm react to you saying, hey, like you weren't going to a competitor, you were like, I'm leaving this, I'm going to do this crazy thing, build a legal technology company. What were some of the reactions you got?
Pretty much unanimously, people thought I was crazy.
Right.
Because especially, I think I was the same. Like when I worked at a firm, I had total tunnel vision. I was like, the only thing that anyone wants to do and the only thing that indicates success is becoming a partner at this firm.
Right.
If you do anything other than that, you go and have like literally anything other than that, you have not made it all the way to the end.
Yeah, you
Uh,
failed.
exactly. You failed.
Yeah.
And so it also sort of made me feel a little like, am I doing the right thing? Is this crazy? But at the end of the day, what I thought, and I actually heard someone else on one of your podcasts say this too, which is that you leave your stable, firm job or your stable job, you go do something crazy like that, like you start a company and you fail. You are only more marketable a year from now when you come
Mm.
back to the firm. Because not only do you have the experience that you had, but you now have this like unique experience that allows you to have new perspectives into your legal work. So
Yeah.
I thought if I fail a year from now, I'm gonna come knock on Sidley's door and they'll let me back in. So hopefully.
Also, not to mention the confidence, at least for me, that you gain during that, especially the initial periods, just of starting your own business. You can go from being a regular associate to becoming a rainmaker. I mean, really, over the course of a year, because you develop these skills that are basically they're sales skills, right? You're convincing your developer to join you because you won't need to, sell this as a good idea. You're convincing your initial clients, you're convincing maybe investors, whatever it might be. You're always just convincing. That's all sales is, right? And so I also had that same thought. I said, look, and I did not work as a lawyer for 7 years. It was like 2. And I was like, worst case scenario, I'll start that. Worst case scenario, I will be a first year associate somewhere. I won't be homeless. Like, I won't be out on the street, right? It won't be
Exactly.
ideal, but I won't be out in the street. Best case scenario, this works out. The more, the middle case scenario is that somebody's going to be like, ooh, interesting. Like, come join us and be a startup lawyer or whatever. Like, who knows? But it is scary. I mean,
And
you're
if you
right.
don't do it, you'll regret it. You might regret it for the rest of your life because you always think, what if I had done it? And I do
Right.
think there are certain times in your life for
Right.
everyone. I mean, this is a very, very personal decision. So I'm not applying this knowledge for everyone. But for me, like I started a company when I think maybe I was married. Yeah, I guess I was married, but we didn't have any kids. And so it was so much easier. Like
Right.
you don't have anything to think about. Whereas the more complicated your life gets,
Exactly.
the more considerations you have on like, oh, well, now I have my kids' tuition or you have whatever it is that you have to think about.
Exactly. Yeah. And you still hear people do it, but it
Yeah.
becomes
Oh, yeah. And
riskier and
you
riskier.
definitely can, but
I
there's just
mean,
some more considerations you have.
yeah, right. And look, and I will say this, and again, to your point, does not reflect on everyone, but as children of immigrants or immigrants, taking risks is important. I mean, we come to America to kind of leverage everything that the country has to offer and to give back and to build a business along the way, but you got to be smart. If you have family wealth and you've been in this country for many generations and you just fall down on your luck and your business doesn't work out, there's probably some kind of support system. If you're an immigrant, you just don't have anything. I mean, you really don't. Because I've heard of podcasts where people put their mortgage, their house up for, they refinance their house and their spouse isn't working and their spouse maybe is working more now and their kids everyone's stressed, but they're like, I believe in this. And then it becomes $1 billion company. Congratulations. For every one of those, there's probably 20 that don't work out. Right.
But I guess this is sort of like, I mean, most of your listeners are immigration lawyers, right? So the one unique thing you have here is that you still have your law degree to fall back on. Like if you're a traditional business starter, you're starting a traditional business and you have nothing else, you have to now go find out, what am I even going to do? Like, what is my job? Whereas as a lawyer, it's like, oh, there's always a stable path back. If you decide this
someone will hire you as a lawyer, somebody out there. So yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And the fact that you took that risk to start the business. And then of course, you had this moment where you pivoted. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like you started this thing. I mean, initially when you went full time, you were still building this out to be a domestic violence platform. It sounds like you were charging. So I guess it was sort of for profit, but maybe, I don't know if you had your sights set on like $1 billion company or whatever, but you were still, you recognize you need to make money from that. You've shared that you had folks coming in from different disciplines. Is that the thing that sort of that pushed you to turn away from, or not turn away from, but to pivot towards being a broader legal technology platform? Or was there anything else that was kind of, considered for you?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, to in the first year of leaving the firm and starting the business was a huge learning curve, I think, for me, and I would think for most people who are leaving a field and going into to a new field. So I was learning so much about things that I really hadn't even considered before. Like, okay, you can make money, but what is truly the cost of acquiring customers? In a business, so specifically with this domestic violence business, we were selling to consumers. And this is really relevant to a lot of what I tell our customers now, because now our customers are building tools in the same way that I was building the domestic violence platform. So I oftentimes give this whole spiel to them of, you need to know that the practice area that you're building a product for is one that your cost of acquisition, like customer acquisition costs, are efficient, that you can scale, and that you sort of know what your market size is. It doesn't have to necessarily be huge if you're going to saturate the whole thing, but you need to know, like, what is the market size that you think you can capture, and does that make sense to you from a financial perspective? That's the main thing that I think I hadn't really considered in going into the domestic violence realm. Um, I wanted to build a tool for domestic violence survivors, but I didn't think about the fact that I didn't have a network of domestic violence survivors coming to me already. I would have to work through legal aid organizations to get through those. Or we started to do like Google ads for these. And we were competing on Google ads with lawyers who were charging like tens of thousands of dollars for domestic violence cases. And so it was sort of becoming inefficient to drive traffic in a way that was scalable to
Mhm.
those customers. Another sort of little story about this is, um, we wanted a pricing model that made sense for everyone. Like, we wanted to be really, really affordable. So we started with this $15 rate. But I remember one of the customers who came through and needed to file a restraining order had to do mail, like they had to file by mail, and they couldn't figure it out. And given that I wanted to like give full customer service, I spent like a day taking their information, like putting it into an envelope and going and basically being their like courier, taking it
Mhm.
to the post office, paying for their shipping. And at the end of that, I was like, wow, this is like, I've spent way more in value than $15 on this
Right.
person. And so that was one of the considerations, was if we're going to go the legal product for a specific area route, it needs to be one that is scalable going into the future. And the bigger that we get, it doesn't mean that we're losing more money. It means that we're making more money.
Right.
So that was one thing. And then the second was that when we started to build tools for lawyers, we were seeing that we were thinking about building internal tooling to make that more efficient. So we're like, if we could build some automation software within our company, then we could help these lawyers build them more rapidly. And the more and
Mm.
more we did that, we realized our goal as a company is we want to make access to legal services universal. That's our vision as a company. And the way that we do that is by empowering legal professionals to better serve and reach their clients. And the best way for us to do that is by giving them the software, not by giving them bespoke, like one-to-one
Mm.
services and giving them like a technology services agreement. So it was a combination of understanding where the scale would come from and how we could make this a sustainable business model, and really making the impact that we wanted to have on that community. And the interesting thing is, now we have legal aid organizations, law firms, people building tools, including domestic violence tools, on our platform.
Mm.
But they already are like the legal aid organization who's serving all of the folks, and they don't need to spend all that time and money getting them through the door because they are already the natural spot.
So this would be a good time for me to ask, for myself and for the listeners and audience, what is Gavel? How does it work? What does it do? Like if I'm a law firm, let's say, or a legal services provider, what can I expect from
Yeah. So Gavel is a no code automation platform that enables lawyers to build end to end legal products. So there are really two main ways that people use our platform. One is for pure document automation. Like, you just have documents that you want to automate, and even you might even just be using those inside of your firm. You can generate those documents much more rapidly by automating them inside of Gavel, because what you do is you have fields that populate into your documents. So if you fill out someone's name, obviously that's the most basic element, like it fills out all the places it's supposed to be. You can have logic that says, if someone, is from, let's say, like from a certain country, then you want the documents to fill out in a certain way. Um, and there's all these rules that you can implement. So all that legal knowledge that you have, you code it into the system. It can be for traditional document automation, but what's really popular on our platform is building end-to-end tools that you can serve your clients with. So for example, if you wanted to build a TurboTax for immigration law, you can do that on Gavel. And the way that you do that is you come onto the platform, you create questions, and we have these little building blocks that allow you to route people down different paths. You can put videos that explain elements to them, and then you help them generate the documents, and you can even collect payment through the platform. It doesn't necessarily have to be like TurboTax is obviously a self-serve tool. It doesn't need to be a DIY tool. Actually, most of the tools that are built on Gavel are what we call like a hybrid model, where the technology helps the customer through part of the process, but then the lawyer takes over to do some advice and counsel, or some document review, or some additional element of direct legal representation before the client gets to the end of that process. And really, it enables lawyers to scale up their practices and serve so many more people than they would have otherwise.
So if you have some questions for you. So if you are a law firm automating some sort of process, let's say, and maybe that process has some documentation baked into it, right? So part of that process is gathering information and filling out forms based on that information. Maybe another part of the process is some sort of a checklist or whatever it might be. Is there a client-facing version of that? So if I'm a lawyer, I'm using Gavel, I built this thing, I want my client, the individual, to use it. Do they then get a login, or is it like a link? Like, how does that actually kind of look, you know?
Yes, absolutely. That's probably one of the most important parts, is the client-facing aspect. So, you can send either a link or a login to your Gavel portal, where your client can log in, or they don't actually have to log in. You could just have them go, if it's really like short pieces, they can just enter data. But ideally, you have them log in, store their information so they can enter information at their own pace. Like if you have some long workflow that you need them to enter data into, they can fill some of it out today, some of it out tomorrow. And they can continue to come back to that platform. And then on your end, you can see the data that they've entered, if that has triggered documents to be generated inside of your platform, the documents that are generated. They can also pay you through that through novel pricing models. So for example, if you wanted to do flat fee subscription models, you could put paywalls into any of those different pieces of the process. Another thing that you can do is you can bundle together workflows. So let's say you have like a client intake workflow, and then you have some workflow that generates the first set of documents, and then you have another workflow that generates a much later set of documents. You can bundle those in together to sequence them for the client so that they're filling them out at the right times, and you can kind of guide them through that process.
Interesting. So there is sort of like a client-facing version of whatever you might be building, and then your sort of back end or admin, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, and then I guess another question I might have, or I do have, is if I am a law firm and I do traffic violations and whatnot, whatever it might be, or immigration for that matter, and I have this concept that I think Gavel will be great for. What's the sort of journey for me as a lawyer to go from having this idea to actually building it out on Gavel? Is it something that I can get support, from your team, or is it just I have to sit down and say, all right, I'm going to spend 20 hours automating this thing, and to our earlier conversation, know that 20 hours today is going to save me hundreds of hours in the future, and therefore result in more clients, et cetera, et cetera. So is it like all on me? Is there anything that's preset, or I can get help from your team? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so there are some options there. Gavel is very customizable. So if you want to build everything out exactly the way that you want to, there are unlimited logic options for you to do that yourself. And I would say there's three sort of main paths that you can take. One is that you build everything yourself completely on your own. However, we do have unlimited support. So if you want to get on a support call with our team, we can walk you through, if you're trying to get a specific result or a specific set of logic or a specific configuration into the platform, we can walk you through that. And you can get on as many calls with our team as you want for us to help you with that. Two is we do have people who we call Gavel experts who can help you. Let's say you have a process that you want to automate or a set of documents that you want to automate, you can bring that to the Gavel experts. We connect you with the Gavel expert and they can build it out for you end to end. So you wouldn't necessarily need to be sitting down and doing it yourself. And that's particularly, Gavel is pretty easy to use. So that's particularly an option that people use when they just don't have time. They're like, I want to get this started, but I don't have time to sit down and build it out myself.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And then the third is we are building some custom workflows that are pre-built workflows that you can start with right off the bat. So we actually just started doing that this year. And if lawyers have any area where if they're like, I have these 10 forms and they are either county court forms or their government forms or USCIS forms, we are always happy to build those out for free if they're going to apply to other attorneys. So it's sort of like the option of like the Gavel expert, but we do it for you because we know that it'll serve the broader community as well.
Yeah. So sort of like a template of, and then maybe they could update it, but they don't have to start with everything from scratch. What is your name? What is your, like everyone's going to have some basic data that they need. Are there starting points that are sort of, can get them 30% of the way there, 40% of the way, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And with that last option, hopefully like 95% of the way there. And then usually the things that people tweak are maybe, you want to obviously like custom brand it. You might want to use your own language with your clients. You might want to have some like specific disclaimers or videos that you put in there. So those are the options that people usually modify.
So we have a comment here. I think their privacy settings don't allow us to see who it is, but they said, Dorna, if I understand you correctly, Gavel is a no-code workflow automation tool. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I will also say we also have AI onboarding now. So it's no code. And I would also say it's AI enabled because, and that's another way that you could start with, which I didn't mention in the last set, is if you're building it yourself, you can load your documents into the system and we will suggest a workflow for you that you can then decide, okay, is this exactly what I wanted or do I want to make some tweaks? That's something that's been really, really powerful because we've found the biggest obstacle, like we have people who are building 6 or 7, 8 figure revenue businesses on Gavel because they're basically building their own legal technology businesses in particular practice areas. And the biggest obstacle for people to get it off the ground is to actually build it inside of the platform. And so what you can do is you can load those into the platform, and then we will, with Gavel Blueprint, will suggest what you need to build, and that gets you off the ground a lot faster.
So like I upload documents and the AI reads it and it's a divorce papers and whatnot. You're like, okay, this is probably a divorce workflow. Here are recommended, things that you can start with for that.
Yeah, it'll say like, okay, these are the questions. And then this is how we tag them over to the document. So it would say, we're going to put, when someone fills out, I'm starting with basic things like name, but obviously this can get much more complex than this. But like when someone fills out their name, it's going to populate in these 10 places on these documents. So it'll actually connect the documents with the client facing form that you're also going to have.
And for people who are building, multiple workflows, are these typically firms that have, multiple practice areas that they're in? Or is it like even within one practice area, they have different sort of processes for different types of divorce or different immigration, visa application or something like that?
Yeah, it's more, well, both and the latter. So if you, even within one practice area, you might want to have multiple workflows. The most common one I would say, like you always start with probably a basic client intake workflow. And then in the example of divorce, you might have one workflow for your uncontested divorces. You might have one workflow for your contested divorces. You can add a ton of logic within those workflows. So for example, you might have people go down one path if they have property and children, another path if they don't, but those can all be within the same workflow. But you might split it up into multiple different forms, multiple different workflows, even within the same practice area.
Not to put you on the spot here, but do you have any insight into how some of the immigration lawyers that are using Gavel kind of use it?
Yeah. So I've seen some really interesting ones being built. One that kind of comes up off the top of my head is someone building one for, it's the extraordinary ability. I'm not an immigration lawyer, so I'm not for all the stuff, but the extraordinary ability visa.
Yeah.
And what's actually really interesting about immigration is there are so many different types of immigration, and each one of those has pretty big markets that if you can capture that niche, you can really expand and generate quite a bit of revenue from it. So most of the immigration tools that I see, they're really laser focused on one specific type of immigration and one market that they're trying to saturate. So
Mhm.
that's one
So
example. I don't actually, I only know about the ones when they tell me about it, because if you want to
right,
like know
yeah,
what
for
your
sure, yeah,
workload, you
yeah.
can't. But that's one example. What else? There's people who are building workflows for like TN visa renewals.
Mhm.
We've seen some for H-1B. Really, immigration law does really lend itself to this type of platform, especially if you want, if especially because you're typically doing it on a flat fee anyway for some of these areas. And so the more you can improve the process, not just for your efficiency purposes, but also because this is for the best interest of the customer. Like the customer actually wants you to be using technology, and they have a better experience when they go through this
Right.
process.
Yeah, and honestly, even within immigration, which is certainly a niche as far as non-immigration lawyers are concerned, once you get into immigration, you realize that you can't just if you say you just practice immigration, you are probably I mean, there's brilliant attorneys everywhere, but let's just put it this way: there are people who specialize supremely specifically within immigration. To your point, I only do O1, extraordinary ability visas. I only work with investors. I
Mhm.
only do like high volume, corporate H1B, L1, et cetera visas. So yeah, even within the realm of immigration, you can have so many custom workflows. So that's definitely interesting. I wanted to sort of put it into the context of the listeners so that they can think, oh, this is how I could envision using it, for them to have.
Even I guess maybe let me take it one more. Well, I'll give you one more example that's like, especially if you're just dipping your toe into software or automation. We had an immigration law firm who built just I think it's like the employer letter.
Mhm.
Is that you send to the employer, so the employer can say this is like how much this person's paid, this is their current job, this is who else we have in these jobs. So just the employer letter. And all they do right now, they just sort of started on Gavel. All they do is they send that to the employer fills out the little client intake workflow, the little workflow on the web, and that document, they can sign it, that document comes back to the firm. That's all it does. It's so limited, but it really is a very simple example of how they, first of all, get much more rapid response rates from their clients, because it's an easy process to go through. But they also have higher NPS scores. Like people just really like using technology, and they're used to that digital convenience. So you
Yeah,
can start really small if you want to not even start with the full-fledged platform.
and just for folks listening, NPS score is Net Promoter Score, which basically says it's like, would you recommend us to somebody else? So effectively, if you have a high NPS score, it means they were happy with your service and would tell others about it. And despite all the digital marketing and everything, word of mouth is still always, I think it's going to remain the most powerful form of, you know, marketing and advertising. So having a high NPS score based on really good technology or very quick response rates is a great way to have a business continue to do well.
Very
Yeah,
true.
that's super interesting. So, what are your thoughts, maybe a little bit on? I mean, in a sense, your Gavel allows kind of anybody within the legal industry. I mean, potentially outside of the legal industry too. But let's just say within the legal industry, anyone focusing on any field of law to get some form of automation, which is huge. But also, where do you focus, right? So, like, what are some of the things that you're working on, or into the future? Where do you kind of see Gavel going from where you are today?
Yeah. So one of the big things that we're continuing to work on is that AI onboarding. So we want to make sure that we can get people up and running as fast as possible. So that's really everything that helps lawyers find immediate value in the platform and allows them to sort of make the tweaks that they want to. So AI onboarding, we already have it launched both for Word documents and for PDF documents, where you can load those Word documents, load those PDF documents, and we can generate workflows for you, but always sort of fine tuning and making that more perfect. Second is these pre-built workflows that I was mentioning. So we're always taking requests from new customers. If they have an area that they want us to build workflows for them that they can use as a base, we will go out and build those for them. So if anyone's listening and you're interested in starting on Gavel, please reach out to me. We'd love to build some of those out for you. And then other than that, it's really just completely allowing, like, what we want to be is when I was starting this domestic violence platform, I needed a software developer to help me build this tool. What we want to be is we want to be the software developer in your back pocket that doesn't cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but that costs you like a very affordable software rate. And you can build almost anything that you want. So we're always layering in more complexity or capability for complexity into the system so that when you have a way that you want to structure your workflows, we have a button that allows you to do that in an instant.
Mm-hmm. So basically people can, in the immigration space or beyond can say, oh, I want to build some software for this, whatever that might be. And you want, the idea would be that Gavel sort of is the place to do that rather than, hiring an engineer, building out your own code base and all that.
Exactly. And what's interesting is it doesn't necessarily need to be that you want to go step away from your law firm completely and go start a full legal tech business. Some people do that, but it's oftentimes really just modifying the way that you're practicing right now to become slightly more tech enabled and deliver better service to your customers, really exponentially increase your revenue and just scale out the number of people that you're able to serve.
Yeah, no, that's great. I remember when no code website building even started out, and that was a big, a lot of lawyers do that as well, right? If they just want a simple solo practice, one person, they do a couple of things, like they can go on Wix, for example, and build a really beautiful, functional, interactive website. And the no code / low code thing is it sort of suddenly makes you be able to sort of join the 21st century without having to be a technologist. And I think for lawyers, that's definitely I don't want to say it's a challenge, but it's not always a top priority. And when they think about the effort it takes to implement or to build rather new software, honestly, even to build a new website, like GMI Rocket, we do websites for law firms. It's not DIY, like I have a web person, but we try to make it really accessible. Like they tell us what to do. We're like, great, got it. You don't have to do anything. We deliver the website for you, but we don't do it a ton, right? Because I recognize that a lot of law firms just basic site, right? And so there's sometimes people that go to me and I say, yeah, just go to Wix or, one of these WordPress is a little bit more challenging, but yeah, one of these sort of no code, you drag and drop things and then boom, you have yourself a really beautiful web presence. So I like the idea of no code workflow automation because you could drag and drop some things and now suddenly you're a law firm that has like a portal for a client, and not just a portal for them to enter basic information, but to actually work through the steps of a particular case. So yeah, it's cool. I love the idea.
Yeah, there's so many out of the box tools across the sphere in whatever you want to do that can help you really transform the practice of law.
And it's only a matter of time before not having some sort of software makes people kind of raise their eyebrows and be like, are you like, can I trust you as a professional, as a law firm? If you're
actually, it's really interesting that you say that because that's another aspect that I feel like that clients are looking for now. So by using technology, you're telling your clients, I'm at the forefront. I'm not wasting your money. I'm going to do the best possible work for you because I'm, availing myself of all the tools that I can, and then spending my time on the real parts that matter. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think people say that, but then they don't put it into action until they lose a client that says, just a small aside. When I was buying, I have a little cabin in upstate New York. And for this apartment, when I was buying this apartment, I got recommended a bank, for the mortgage, right? And their customer service was great, super responsive. They responded to my emails right away. They would call me. And then, I said, great. They gave me terms. I accepted the terms. And they were like, awesome. Can you send me XYZ information? And I was like, how? They're like, just via email. I said, and I was like, no. I'm like, I'm not sending you this via email. It has my social security number or whatever it was, like information. And they said, oh, okay, sure. Well, how about this? Here's like the login for my Microsoft Dynamics, whatever, like their workspace. They sent this thing to me, and so I had to upload like into their web portal, and they had to take away my my login and then go back in. It was like some kind
Oh
of
my God.
cockamamie thing. And I reached out to my agent and I was like, dude, what is this? He's like, no, they're great. And I said, I'm not working with them. And then you know where I went? Rocket Mortgage. I called them up. I went to rocketmortgage.com. I chatted with somebody. They were incredibly nice. They called me right away. The term, the terms of the mortgage were the same, or more or less the same. Here's your portal. I have two-factor authentication. It's beautiful. It's really easy to use. And I went with them. And I don't remember. I have to go back into my email as to whether or not I gave the other place my reason for not going with them. I definitely told my agent. But to me, it was, and this was, by the way, like a pretty big local bank. And
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, you guys can't, maybe I'm particularly sensitive to this in a regular, but it's just that it's not even that I knew about the data, security issues or the potential of issues. I had to wait for you to reply to me. Like here, I could log in whenever I want, go through this tool, upload things as I need to, double check that I've uploaded the right information. And that was the difference between me going with this, bank versus another. I don't think it's any different with a law firm. If you tell them, great, just come to my office and drop off these forms, versus another one, that says, here's your login. Whenever you get a chance, upload them. We'll have a checklist along the way, so you know what you've uploaded, what's still missing. I'm going to go with the second one because yes, I have to log in and figure out this tool, but these tools are easy and they make the whole process more straightforward. So I want to share that as, I haven't had this issue with lawyers, but even with, like real estate, in the real estate context, which is, similar. You're spending a lot of money, there's sensitive information, et cetera, that user experience to me was a game changer.
So true. And another thing that sort of sticks out to me is you were sort of the early adopter, right? So that was like, I don't know how many years ago, but a few years ago, let's say. And maybe not everyone was thinking in the way that you are, but I think so many more people now are. So even as a lawyer, if you're thinking, no one, I only had one customer who left me or one client who left me because of this, 2 years from now, it's going to be 10x that,
Yeah.
because everyone is the knowledge is spreading.
Agreed. And also everyone uses their mobile phone and everyone gets more and more used to technology. My grandma, I do talks about illegal tech quite often, and I always use my grandma as an example. She will, depending on the day, WhatsApp me, she'll Facebook message me, she'll like message me on somewhere else. She likes and comments on my posts, and I'm like, guys, my 81-year-old grandmother who was born in the forest of Kazakhstan during World War II, she's more tech savvy than you guys are. No excuse. No excuse.
Totally.
Get with the times, get more tech savvy. But, again, I understand that it's challenging for people time wise. So, what's really interesting about what you guys are building is that it takes away a lot of the difficulty of becoming, a tech forward firm where you don't have to build anything on your own, et cetera. It's sort of done for you. So, awesome. I love it. I think we're building towards the same future, which is very exciting.
Definitely. Yes.
So where can people find you? Where can people find Gavel, who are interested in checking it out, or maybe following you on social as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So Gavel is www.gavel.io. And I also I'm all over social media. All of my handles are Dorna _@AT_Gavel. And that's where, as you mentioned earlier, I talk all about how lawyers are using technology. So follow me there if you want to learn more.
Awesome. Well, Dorna, thank you so much. I hope everyone goes to check out Gavel, to learn more about what you're doing. And obviously myself as a growing startup founder and you as well, even if someone reaches out and doesn't become a client, but offers us insights, feedback, ideas, et cetera, it's all valuable. It's all valuable. So definitely recommend folks checking you out. Thank you so much for joining. This is really fun. I hope more immigration lawyers try to use your software, because I think it's such a huge industry that is flat fee based, as you mentioned. And so there is an incentive to be as efficient and automated as possible. So this could be a great opportunity for people that maybe don't want to leave their existing tools or, case management or whatever, but see opportunity for greater automation at their firm. This can be, I assume, something that complements their existing tech stack, not necessarily replaces it. as well.
Yes, and we have an open API and integrate with several tools, and also have a Zapier integration. So lots of ways if you do want to transfer data between systems, and that's also possible.
I forgot to ask that, so thank you for bringing it up. Exactly, perfect, awesome. Well, thank you, Dorna. This was great. I appreciate having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We had we actually, another comment, I think it's probably the same person, LinkedIn user, saying great conversation. Thank you both. Thank you as well. LinkedIn user, whoever you are, I can't tell on the stream, but thank you so much for tuning in and listening. So just want to give a quick thank you again to Lex Reception as the main sponsor of this episode. So if you didn't hear in the beginning, Lex Reception is a legal intake, reception, and client support services. From answering calls and messages in real time to scheduling appointments. Lex Reception provides immigration law firms and frankly any law firms as well with 24/7 legal answering specialists, so that you as a law firm, you don't have to worry about missing again a client or a prospect reaching out to your firm. They can proactively reach out to prospects for you, so almost like a sales team. They integrate, which is really important, as we discussed with Dorna. APIs, are important because you don't want to replace things. You don't want to do double data entry. You want tools to integrate with one another. So Lex Reception integrates with the number of tools that law firms tend to use today. And for listeners of the GMI Rocket Show, you get $250 off your first month of service with them. So use the link in the show notes or reach out to Lex Reception directly and tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. So thank you, everybody. Amazing conversation, amazing episode. For those of you who watch or listen live, I'll probably be taking a little break for a few weeks as I am going on vacation and then just traveling abroad for a bit. Maybe I'll do some episodes from abroad. We'll see. But as always, have a great weekend. Stay safe, everybody. And peace out.